through history, okay? This is going to be so amazing, and I'm planning on learning a lot also. Seated here are two wonderful and very courageous veterans, Mr. Smith and Mr. Famularo. And let's just pause for a second and thank them for coming. Also, behind them are Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, and they have a flag with 48 stars. And it looks probably very similar. I have the same flag in my room. I have a similar flag in my room also. And this is the flag that these two gentlemen served under, okay? Because there were only 48 states at the time of World War II, okay? So what we're going to do very quickly is everybody stand and pledge allegiance to the flag, okay?
This is a false flag, though. You're trading your own country.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just very quickly regarding this flag, it was December 7th, 1941, following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that the United States declared war on Japan. Japan's allies, who were Germany and Italy, in turn declared war on the United States. That happened on December 11th, 1941. This flag was flying over the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. that day. So it's a very special flag that has returned to Washington many times on some of the honor flights that Rhonda and I do. So you guys, when you get home later today, when you're on Facebook or something, look up Leatherstocking Honor Flight, and you'll see some very interesting pictures, and you'll meet some of the other heroes that have been on trips with us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Who wants to go first? You got Tom, you got Sal. They're good buddies. They served on Iwo together, and they've got incredible stories to tell.
First of all, before we get started, I'd like to thank Rhonda Cooper, John Cooper, the junior high school, and you, your student body, for allowing me to come here to speak to you. Thank you. Let's go back to a different time frame. Let's go back to 1943. I graduated high school at AHS, which was Amsterdam High School. I was 17 years old when I graduated. I turned 18 years old the 3rd of September. No sooner back in them days, no sooner you turned 18 years old, you registered for the draft. After you registered for the draft, it took about 10 days to 2 weeks, and you were gone. You were gone in the Army or the Navy or whatever. I wanted to go into the Marine Corps. Why, I'll never know. Well, I went away on what they call selective service. I went to Albany on a car. My father took me to Albany. While there, I got my physical. I got all checked out. I took my oath. That was it. There, with about, maybe about a dozen other guys, they put us on a train. And there we made the long trip to Parris Island, South Carolina. That is the Marine boot camp for the East Coast. While there, I met for the first time my DI. In other words, my drill instructor. Let me impress you on one thing first. While you're under his command, he is nothing short but God. He looked at us and he called us some kind of funny names. And he said to us like this: for these next 12 weeks, your heart and soul may belong to God, but your rear end is going to belong to me. Little did I know how right he was. Well, while doing all your physical exercises, close order drill, marching, we went to the rifle range. I loved that. And I was fairly athletically inclined, and I kind of enjoyed it. While on a rifle range, you fire for what they call record. I wound up being a sharpshooter. That's the little cross that you see on the picture there. From there, when we finished boot camp, we went to New River, North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, which was exactly the pits. Cold, miserable, damp, awful. I hated Camp Lejeune venomously. Shortly after the holidays, we went to Camp Pendleton. They put us aboard the trains and moved us right straight across the country to Camp Pendleton, Oceanside, California. Boy, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. The weather was so perfect. Everything about California was beautiful. There we went to our training and advanced training. And I had a weekend pass this one time. And I went to Los Angeles. I always wanted to go to the Hollywood Canteen, where all the movie stars, they're there entertaining the GIs, and the place is mobbed. I was there with 3 or 4 of my very good close friends. While we were there, I fell in love with a pretty little girl who incidentally was very famous. Her name was Betty Davis. She was serving coffee, donuts, and sandwiches, and I asked her to dance. She said, "Honey, I'd love to dance with you, but I'm awful busy, and as you can see, I have to get these sandwiches and coffee out." But when she called me honey, I was the king of the road. Now, our training is all complete. They load us aboard trucks, and they took us to San Diego, the piers in San Diego. There I saw all these ships. Reality hit me in the face all at once. No more laughing, good times, or anything like that. I froze. My legs wouldn't move. The guy in the back of me had to push me. Well, we finally got aboard the ships, and we went to the beautiful Hawaiian Islands. There, we went to the island of Maui. which back then was nothing but jungles. All these here beautiful places were not on Maui at that time. Today, Maui is the epitome of Eden. While on Maui, we went into the 4th Marine Division, who just recently come off of their first campaign, which was Roy Namur in the Kwajalein group. We went in as replacements. Day in, day out, day in, day out. That's all we did is practice amphibious landings. They put us aboard LCVPs, which means Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel. That's the one where the ramp goes down and you take right off. Day after day, this went on, till finally we were scheduled for the next campaign, which was in the Mariana Islands, a place called Saipan. Never heard about it in my life. Boy, what a place. Horrible, terrible. We landed on a beach in front of a sugar refinery, which was honeycombed with Japanese snipers. They were picking us off left and right. Till finally we gained a foothold on the beach and got inland. After we were inland, the fighting became more vicious. Till finally, the Japanese, they were kind of bottled up. From the 2nd Marine Division, the 4th Marine Division, and the 27th Army Division. They threw approximately 1,000-man banzai charge at us. Can you picture almost 1,000 people running towards you and wanting to kill you? Believe me, it's awful demoralizing. Well, we took Saipan at a special cost. From there, we went to the next island, which was a few miles away, on the LCVPs. We went to Tinian. They dropped us off, might as well say, far from the shore. I was in the water up to here with my rifle like that, walking in. Of course, the Japanese were expecting us, and we paid the price. Well, after that campaign was all over with, we went back to our home island, which was Maui. There again, amphibious landings, field problems, amphibious landings. Now we were clocked for the next campaign, which was, you might as well say, the tops of them all. A place called Iwo Jima. Believe me, that was a place not to be. We landed February the 19th, 1945. We landed on the beach, which was all volcano ash. You cannot walk or run in volcano ash because you sink right down to your ankles. Try someday walking on a whole pile of marbles. Tough. Trying to run in it. Tough. Every time they try to unload munitions, tanks, cannons, anything heavy, it used to sink right down. It used to sink. And of course, General Kirabashi, who was the Japanese Supreme General on Iwo Jima, who planned it all out. He waited for us to all bunch in all together where we couldn't move. Right around the 5th wave coming in. And then he had his troops open up on us. It was a massacre. We advanced possibly 1.5 miles in 4 days. Now don't forget, Iwo Jima was approximately 5 miles long, shaped like a pork chop, and on the widest part was approximately 2.5, maybe 3 miles wide. At the base was Mount Suribachi, which was the 5th Marine Division sector. Tom and I were both in the 4th Marine Division, and our objective was to take the 2 airfields at all cost. Like I said, took us almost 3 days to get to the first airfield. While we were there on the 4th day, fighting a phantom. They could see us, but we couldn't see them. It was like I said, trying to fight a ghost. By that time, we were pretty well decimated. I was laying in a hole. This is the 4th day on Iwo. I was laying in a hole on my back with my rifle slung across my shoulder. There was another guy in the hole with me. I don't even know who he was. All of a sudden, I heard all these here ships out in the bay blowing their horns, their foghorns, guys yelling, hooray, hooray. I said to this guy, what the heck is going on? He said, they just secured Mount Suribachi. I said, oh boy, that's great. So I was struggling, trying to get up to take a look. Mount Suribachi might have been about a mile away from me. This guy said, hey, look, pal, you better stay down as you are because, boy, you're going to get your head blown off. Well, I finally got to see it for a few seconds. It was very, very tiny because we were so far away. And it was a small flag, too. I missed the second flag raising. The one that was put on the postage stamps, broadcasted and shown all over the country. I missed that one. So as we kept on pushing along, we took the second airfield. And just before the second airfield capitulated, fell into our hands, we came across a section called Turkey Knob and the amphitheater. Now, the amphitheater was a flat piece of ground on this airfield. It looked like a huge theater with a ring of shale all around it. Huge. There I got hit. I got shot with what they call a Japanese Nambu machine gun. I got hit in my right leg 3 times. The 4 Japanese soldiers that got me, they got out of their hole, which was like a pile of shale and a hole on the bottom of it. They were going to come out to finish me off. But when I got hit, I managed to hold on to my rifle, my M1. I saw them coming for me. I fired at them wildly. I don't even think I hit any of them, but it slowed them up. And just about that time, you could hear the whirring of a tank, an American tank. It was coming up this here draw. It kept on coming closer and closer to me. I couldn't move because I was in so much pain, but I kept on yelling, "Stop, stop, stop." I thought they were going to run right over me. All of a sudden, the tank commander, he got on the bullhorn. He said, "Lay perfectly still. We're going over you." I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die now. I'm going to be flatter than a pancake by the time this thing gets through with me." Well, it went over, and the noise was deafening. All of a sudden, I heard clank. The escape hatch on the bottom of the tank sprung open. 4 pair of arms came down and grabbed a hold of me by my dungaree jacket and pulled me up into the tank. The Japanese were still firing at the tank, and it sounded like popcorn. You ever make popcorn? No. They go pop, 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 pop. Well, that's the way the bullets were going off of the tank. Up there, they sunk the needle into the back of my neck, which was the morphine. And I was kind of free of pain for a while. They took me fairly close to the beach, and there they put me on a poncho, which is like a shelter half, I should say. And they carried me over to the beach. I was waiting for the LCVP to come in to pick me up and take me out to the hospital ship. When I got onto that beach, I couldn't believe my eyes. As far as your eyes could see, the beach was on an angle like that. And as far as your eyes could see, there were stretchers, ponchos, shelter hats, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dead and wounded Marines, all waiting to be transferred to the hospital ships. Well, finally, they always take the worst ones off first. Then they finally got to me, and I was on a hospital ship. I was evacuated to the 111th Field Hospital on Guam. I was there for, possibly 2 weeks. One day, these doctors were coming through with a whole entourage in back of them. Big clipboards, writing things down. They stopped at my bed, or my sack, as we call it. And he wrote something on my chart. And they kept on going on. Well, the pharmacist mate, him and I were pretty good friends while I was there. I called him over and I said, what the heck did he write on my chart? He looked at it and he said, you're going home. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. That night I couldn't sleep, I was so happy. Tears were coming out of my eyes. I was so happy. Well, 3 days later, we were put aboard a C-54. There were no seats in it. There were all racks, and they had all stretchers in there. We flew from Guam to Midway, from Midway to Hickam Field in the Hawaiian Islands, and from Hickam Field to San Diego. While we were flying close to San Diego, the pilot said in the intercom, fellas, if you look outside the right window, you can see sunny California. There was a guy way in the back somewhere in a stretcher. All of a sudden he starts singing, California, here I come. I cried like a baby because I says, I'm home. I'm home. Shortly after that, I came out of the hospital, maybe like about 3.5 months later. And I just hung around San Diego Naval Boot Camp. We got discharged on what they call the point system. You had to have so many points to be discharged. When it got to my number, I got aboard a train and went right straight across the country again. I had to go to the Philadelphia Naval Yard. There, I was discharged from there. And believe me, it was heaven being home. Are there any questions you'd like to ask? Again, class, thank you so very much for inviting me, and thank you for speaking to you.
Couple questions. When you trekked the 1.5 miles across the...
I can't hear.
Oh.
Come on over here, son. Ask the boy.
When you trekked the 1.5 miles across the island in like the volcanic ash, did you like hike up any mountains in that, or?
No. The question is, while you were in Iwo Jima, did you hike over any mountains?
No, that was the 5th Marine Division. The only mountain was Mount Suribachi, but that was the 5th Marine Division sector. we had, our job was taking the 2 airfields, which was very, very important. Does that answer your question? I hope it does anyway.
Take a look at that. That's the volcano ash from Iwo Jima. So you can see what it's just gravel. And if you dug a hole, it's caved in all the time. That's a souvenir I managed to get home.
You would dig a foxhole on the beach or wherever the volcano ash was, and it would fill right back up again. That's what it's like. Okay, Tom.
What kind of reaction did your family have when they...
I'm sorry, son, you gotta talk
All right.
louder. I don't hear.
What reaction did your family have when you were wounded?
hit when you were born?
When my mother got the telegram saying that I was wounded in action, my sister told me that my mother went to church on her hands and knees. She crawled up to the altar to thank God that I was home. Does that answer your question? Thank you, son. Thank you.
Any other questions?
We will let you go, and we'll see if there's more at the end.
I'm gonna hand you over to Tom now.
I can't hear.
So we'll let you go, and we'll see if there's
I have a little different story in Sal, and as he mentioned, we were buddies, and I'll start there to let you know how I met him. Of course, I happened to be in Walmart one day, and I saw a cap on his head, and I said, gee, I've got to needle that guy. I didn't have anything showing that I was a Marine. So I walked up to him and said, were you a Marine? Innocently like, he looked at me, and he said, can't you see? And I said, yeah, I can see. What outfit were you in? I was in Company G, 2nd Battalion, 24th Marines. And at each step, I would say, so was I, so was I. And he looked at me, and he started to say, well, you're a smart guy, aren't you? But from that moment on, we bonded together, and we compared notes, and we probably ran across each other a dozen times, since he was in Company G and I was in Company F. But I'll backtrack and give you a little view from my perspective. A young boy in high school, I was saying, I didn't like high school. I just hated it with a passion. But I love football, I love sports, and eventually, we were out playing football one day, and our girls came by and said, let's go to the movies. So we went to the movies. After the movies, we visited one of the girls' home and listened to music. And all of a sudden, screeching. Pearl Harbor's been bombed. Pearl Harbor's been bombed. We all looked at each other and said, where's Pearl Harbor? So we soon found out about it. Well, all of us were pretty patriotic at that time. The country had gone through a depression, and they bonded together in many areas. Well, I just couldn't wait to get in the Marine Corps. So I went down to a recruiting office and signed up. They gave me an eye test, I failed the eye test, and couldn't believe it. Anyway, I went home, told my mother and dad, and my mother, God bless her, she fed me carrots every way you could imagine. Raw carrots, boiled carrots, pickled carrots, everything. And believe it or not, one day I looked in the mirror, I was getting a little yellow. So I had to job in the high school office, and the principal had a smell and eye chart on the wall. And I borrowed it, took it home, memorized it, went back down to the recruiting office, and passed the eye chart. Well, loaded up in Albany, they took us down to Paris Island, and the first thing they said to us, you'll be sorry, you'll be sorry. And, well, I never was sorry. I think most of the enlisted we're patriotic, we loved our country, we loved our fellow man. And, well, anyway, my cousin Johnny decided to join me, and we both went to Paris Island. Well, when we went through the examination, he gave me the high sign. The test was the same, it's null and chart. Well, the doctor looked at me and said, I'm sorry, Marine, you're going to be going home because you have a heart murmur. And I mentioned to him, look, I play football, I run all over the Adirondack Mountains, and everything else. He was telling me, I can't handle this. He said, do you want to be a Marine that badly? And I said, yes. He said, all right, get the hell out of here, Marine. And I entered the Marine Corps. Well, as Sal said, you'll be sorry. Well, it wasn't that bad. But we marched at midnight for an hour or two. If someone made a mistake, dropped his rifle, they would take you out in midnight, and the whole platoon had to suffer for it. So if he made a mistake, we all suffered for it. Well, finally, when we got through, everyone got a 2-week leave. Or 20 of us, they didn't give us a leave, so I asked why we were not getting a leave. And they said, well, you're all going to Camp Lejeune. You've been assigned to Carlson's Raiders. Well, we got up to Camp Lejeune, and Sal gave a description of it. Cold, snowing, ice on the lakes, creeks, and it was a mess, to be honest about it. They had vines hanging across the creeks, and they always fell short, so you had to drop in water, get cold, and we had a couple of interesting experiences. For example, I'll give you one. When we were just about ready to leave Camp Lejeune, they had a big swimming pool, and they set it on fire. And we had to jump in that fire with full packs on our back and our rifles. And as you learn quickly, and I'll give you a quick little demonstration, you go in the water and it's all on fire. And you wonder, how are you going to do this? And you know they're training you because if you're on a ship and the ship is hit, you're going to have to survive that fire. Well, it took a little practice, but you'd swim underground, underwater, and then you'd come up to the top and fleck it out. And you'd open a hole where the fire would separate. And you stick your nose up, take a deep breath, and do the same thing the length of a large, extra large swimming pool. Well, following that quickly, they shipped us out, and on the way to California to join the Raiders, they disbanded the Raiders. And I was assigned to the 4th Marine Division. And when I got there, I was a machine gunner. They assigned me to be a machine gunner. Well, we trained and we marched 29 miles sometimes, did all kinds of maneuvers, and being naive, I felt very patriotic. I couldn't wait to get at the enemy. They hurt our people, they killed our people, and all of us were of the same attitude. Well, we boarded, in February, as I remember, we boarded a transport and went straight from the United States, the only Army and Navy Marine Corps group that ever left the States, went straight into combat. Well, we hit the Marshall Islands, and I was in the first wave. I believe I was one of the first ones to land on Japanese mandated territory. We hit the beach, and we moved in, and my lieutenant set my group over to the side. In front of us, there's nothing but wilderness and blockhouses. The little island next to us called Roy. There's a causeway between the two of them. Well, Roy was where the airfield was, and the more where we hit was full of, blockhouses full of torpedoes, medical supplies. It was the main refueling station in the Pacific. Well, while we were working on that blockhouse, it blew up. And it killed or wounded 80% of my company. It left a hole that you could put half a ship in. Believe me, it was at least 70, 80 yards deep. It was amazing to see who survived. Well, I was hit in the back with a piece of shrapnel, and stayed there all night long. The Japanese counterattacked, and we repelled them a number of times. Following that, the next day, the order came through, secure this damn island. Well, we all became riflemen. We charged the enemy, and the enemy stopped us dead in our tracks. They had a number of machine guns set around. Well, a fellow by the name of Kotick, a pretty good machine gun Marine, he was going by, and I said, look, you go to the left, I'll go to the right. We got to get that machine gun out of here. Well, we did. He went to the left, I went to the right. I got wounded in the leg, and we did get to the machine gun and took it out with a couple grenades. Following that, the corpsman came. They treated me and sent me out to a hospital ship. And they fixed me up for a while and told me I was going on a hospital ship back to Pearl Harbor. Well, I asked the doctor, is it that bad? He said, well, your dad is in pretty bad shape. What had happened is it was a piece of steel about that size, about that thick, didn't hit me sideways. If it did, it would have cut me in half. What happened, it ricocheted off, and of course my back swelled up, turned black and blue. Well, while I was on the ship, I asked if I could go back on my company. He said, I'll let you go back if you promise to go to the Italian aid station when you get back. Well, went back, and of course, I'm glad I did, but my best buddy was laying on the beach. He would kill me before he could take 10 steps. Well, we went back to Maui, and we picked up the recruits, trained again, and then we went off to Saipan and Tinian. Sal did a good job describing Saipan. Saipan was, my estimation, a pretty island, but it was living hell. The first group that landed, I'll say to my left, they managed to get in over 1,000 yards, but it worked its way back to the beach, where we couldn't get off the beach, as he said, for a couple of days. We were right on the edge of the water. We couldn't move in. They had snipers. They had shells dropping on top of us. And what it was, the sugar mill had a big stack up there. And they had spotters up. And the spotters were directing the artillery where to drop the shells. And they were pretty good warriors, I'll tell you. From here to that bag, two of my good friends from Brooklyn, nice guys. They were always arguing about the baseball season, who was the best team, the Giants or Brooklyn, and they were good enough to put a shell right in that hole. That's how accurate they were. Well, after 3 days, we got off, and now they knew I had been trained as a raider. So they gave me a group, and my job became, during the day, you face the enemy, and maybe 50 yards in front of you, half a mile in front of you. And during the day, you're shooting each other, and at night, you had I'll stop right there. To understand the Pacific battle, from one side of the island, straight across the other side, was a line full of Marines. Whether it was 50 yards or half a mile down, the Japanese had their line. So when you quit for the day, you had that middle opening. Well, my job, about 80% of the time, I'll say, was to take my group out and set up an outpost so that if we heard any movement or banzai attacks coming, we could let the troops know. Well, quick story, the first time I ever took a group out, we were out there that night, and we could hear the Japanese laughing and drinking, raising hell. And it was about 3 or 4 in the morning. I said, okay, guys, let's go back to our line. But before I went out, at night when you're in a foxhole, you're not taking any chances. Any noise out there, you're going to shoot at. Well, there was a 37 millimeter little cannon that would knock out a tank. Well, I went over to those fellas and said, look, I'm taking my group out, and I want to come in where you are. Those Marines are trigger happy over there. So they said, okay, we set up a signal. You have a password every night. And I said, I'm going to change the password. I'm going to give you the password, but after I give it to you, I'm going to give you another word. The word is Schenectady. They looked at me, why Schenectady? Because the Japanese cannot say the word Schenectady. And sure enough, we came back from our excursion, sat in the foxhole, and about a half an hour later, wham, wham, wham. little cannon took off. In the morning, there were almost 20, 10 on each side of the road, Japanese soldiers coming in with material to get at our tanks and whatnot. So when they got to the word Schenectady, they fumbled the word, and of course they were dead. Well, that went on for 26 days. I've taken my scout group out, and another incident that took place, we, the first 5, 6, 8 days, we could not see a dead Jap. We could see them, we could shoot them, and give an example, a ton of Garrett cannon went through, and we had to clean the buildings up. But every time we went in, there were any Japs. Couldn't figure it out. Well, 8 or 10 days later, when I'm taking my scout group out, they called me in and said that the 27th is being inserted in the middle of our lines, the 2nd and 4th Marine Division. And we got to tie in with them. So I took my group out, and we came to Mount Tocacho, the 1,500 feet mountain, and beautiful mountain. On the way up the mountain, the smell was outstanding, excruciating, couldn't stand it. And there on the side of the mountain were over 500, 600 dead Japanese. What they had done was drag the wounded, those that were dead, and pile them on the side of the mountain. Well, we managed to tiptoe through there and get up the top of the mountain. Well, now, I always went about twilight time. We couldn't go back down the mountain. It turned dark on us. So we stayed at the top of the mountain that night, and couldn't take a foxhole. It was all coral rock. So we slept on top of the mountain, and next morning, about 5, 6, it started to rain shells. So I couldn't figure it out, and all of a sudden, it dawned on me. It was coming from our rear. They were shelling the top of the mountain. So I grabbed the group, we went down the other side, and who's there at the 27th that I was supposed to find? And saw a lieutenant who was an observer, front line directing things. And he said, "Where'd you come from?" I said, "From the top of the mountain." And what are you doing? He said, "That's our objective today." "Well, I'll tell you what, Lieutenant, give me a piece of paper. I'm a smart, blind kid." And he said, "Why?" "I'm going to deed it over to you. I spent the night up there." And he said to me, "How the hell did I know you were up there?" I said, "Well, you know what? I apologize, you're right." So anyway, took my group back and continued through Saipan and had a few other experiences like that. I was out one time with a group, and on the way back, I noticed 4 or 5 Marines out there on the ground. They were wounded. And the machine gun in a cluster of bushes. So I had my men cover the bushes while I ran out there, and I picked up the first man I found. I swear they weigh 100 pounds. Took them back. In the meantime, they took out that machine gun, and others came and took the other men back. About an hour later, a corpsman came over and said, "Do you know who you picked up?" And I don't know. He said, "That was Colonel Carson." I said, "Oh my God, my former supposed commander." Well, when he became the planning officer for the 4th Marines. So that was interesting to me. Well, we had another couple experiences like that. One I'll tell you again, coming back from another excursion. These things are sort of hairy, to be honest. You go out at twilight, the enemy's watching for you, looking for you, and you had to play games with them. Well, on this one trip back, I put my men in line and looked over there and saw my old machine gun crew. So I walked over, and the foreman of the foxhole, you have ammunition carriers and machine gunners. So I was standing on top of the foxhole, looking down, talking to him. And the tank came around the corner and dropped a shell in the middle. Killed all 4 of them and wounded me. Put a piece of shrapnel on my arm. Well, at that time, I was mad, upset, and without thinking, I could still see myself reaching up. My helmet wasn't hooked on. I reached up, grabbed the helmet through a cloud of smoke, pulled it down. My friends told me later it was comical to them, not the whole serious, to see 2 hands go up through all this smoke and grab an empty helmet. Well, I was upset. So I charged the tank. The tank, in the meantime, turned his turret and started shooting shells into my friends in the line. Well, I got up to the tank, and it dawned on me, what am I going to do against the tank? I had some hand grenades, and I threw the grenades on the tank, and of course it made a lot of noise, so the tank took off. Well, came back, and of course, got treated, and continued on. But those are a few experiences I had on Saipan. Following that, we had a week layoff, and we were ready for Tinian. And of course, we know the Uroge took off from there to drop the atomic bomb on Japan. Well, Sal gave a description how to get in, and we did. Again, I was first off, being a scout, they wanted me in there to see what I could find. Well, they had a diversionary action up in the town of Tinian. They kept everybody busy, and our beachfront was only 60 yards wide, and they dropped you off a good, I'm going to say, 70, 80 yards out in the water. Well, as soon as I got in, I had to move in and set up an outpost. Well, we did that across Tinian, and it was a 9-day operation, to be honest. Well, we got near the end of the island. Now I'm going to go back a little, back to training in Camp Helen. I was naive, young, didn't pay attention to much going on, except every time we did something, I was someplace else. It just happened to be at different places. Like after the first operation, they had a big parade, and they issued medals and whatnot. But I was doing guard duty someplace. So anyway, when I came after the maneuvers, I saw this crowd being interrogated by an officer. And like I said, I was naive and didn't pay attention to things. But my men in my platoon were answering questions. So I walked up and said, what the hell are you guys doing? We're on maneuvers. Those guys could be the enemy. Well, they all laughed. Turned out to be the battalion commander. I was embarrassed. Next day at critique, my company commander, who later became a general, said, TJ, he called me TJ all the time. TJ, I know you're embarrassed, but I'm proud of you. You didn't know the battalion commander. These guys were still in their guts, and you made sure they knew they were wrong. You were wrong, but you were right. I'm proud of you. Well, anyway, we're in the end of time, Tinian, 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile, I don't remember the distance. He said, TJ, I'm going to send you out on a daylight mission. We don't normally do that with scouts because they can see you. So he said, see what you can find. Well, Tinian's pretty island, had nice beaches and cliffs and whatnot. Walking, got my group together, told what we're going to do. We got about halfway to the end, and I'm walking. I made a very bad mistake, and I'm lucky to be alive, I think. You never pass an opportunity off. Against the cliff were big trees and bushes, and normally you check it out. Without thinking, we went by it, and I said to the guys without thinking, on the way back, we'll check that out. Well, we got to the end of the island, didn't see anyone. On the way back, we're checking out that cluster, and lo and behold, there's an immaculately dressed officer. And I walked up to him, I brought my rifle up, I was going to kill him, and he had a pair of field glasses, he was looking at the sea. He pointed to his glasses and said, like that. I said, you speak English? He said, yes. Where'd you learn? Southern California. I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm Vice Admiral Kokokudo. I'm the highest ranking officer in the Pacific today. I'm in charge of all the airplanes. The first airplane. Well, I said to him, tell your men to come out of the cave. Well, he said they're going to die for the emperor. And I said to them, why aren't you dying for the emperor? He looked at me and said, you think I'm crazy? I said, well, I'll tell you I'm crazy. Or get on your knees, and if you move, you're dead. So we had a battle. We killed the people in that cave and took some souvenirs. And one of the souvenirs happened to be 2 suitcases of this size full of Japanese money. When I came out, the admiral said, those are mine. I said, they're not yours, they're mine. So anyway, we opened them up, and lo and behold, I can't pass this around. This is the Japanese yen, 5 yen. it's a big disparity in some of the information I have. But anyway, I took him back and turned him into my commanding officer. And I left the money up front so the guys could have some souvenirs. They wouldn't have to worry about being booby-trapped. Well, by the time I get back to the front lines, a runner came up and said, hey, they want that money, take it back. So I took it back and asked Garrison, what's his name, what's up? He said, he's trying to make a deal with TJ. He wants that money. He swears he'll tell us everything we need to know in the Pacific if he can have the money, and we take them back to Pearl Harbor and find out what else is in the Pacific ahead of us. Well, that's where that story ends. And it ends there because after he was turned in, no one knows whatever happened to him. They, best we could figure out was they took him back to Pearl Harbor. It's not nice to say, but they interrogated him. They kept the money, they killed him. Now, you say we don't do those things, but it's a shame to say this, but many instances during World War II, whether it was Germany, Italy, or the Pacific, we had a group called the OSS, fellow by McDonald ran it, and you had the CIA. And we had some scoundrels in there, and they got what they wanted, and if the money was worthwhile, they kept it. Well, the money I turned in, it's unknown how much it really was. But I've had people tell me that this is worth $20,000, $2,000, and the 2 suitcases were unaccounted, so much money. Well, I'm deviating here. So I wrote a book. And in that book, I wanted to get the facts straight. So I sent a copy of the book to the general. And the general read the book, wrote me a nice letter back. We communicated now and then. And he said, TJ, we have no idea what happened to that money. All we know is we sent it back to Pearl Harbor. Everything you wrote in your book is absolutely true. He wrote a letter confirming that what I did, in my experiences, was the truth. Well, I had President Schumer, Gildebrand, Scott, all support me in my kid trying to get to the truth of this matter. And what they did is, when I went to get all this done in St. Louis, where the records are, they sent me my records about that high, and they also sent them copies. Well, little did they realize, the people in charge, that these high-ranking officers for our state also got the copy. And in the letter, in my file, was a letter from a little lady called Mulvaney. And in the letter it said, I'm trying to find my fiance. He was in the Marines, and I can't find him. And his name is Thomas J. Smith, Jr. That's me. In the meantime, there's another piece in there. Thomas J. Smith, Jr., my serial number is AWL for a month. He was running around Los Angeles. The truth of the matter was, I was on Roy and the Moore getting wounded, so I couldn't get wounded and run around Los Angeles. Well, the senators all tried to get to the bottom of it. Well, we could never get anyone to admit anything, except my records were stamped, caution, confidential, private. So the government at that time was trying to cover up all this stuff that was going on. Now, that's the end of that story. We still haven't found out why in my records they responded finally. I was watching TV, believe it or not, and Senator Schumer's on. He's talking about a time spell. I said, what is this? My brother looked at me. He said, that's you. I said, yeah, I guess so. So anyway, he said that he had a private source, an admiral, that dug deep enough to come up with the truth. And the truth was that they didn't want to admit that they salted my records. And what they did say is we could find no evidence of this, no evidence of that. Well, that's the end of that story. I know it's getting late. I'm going to jump to Iwo. Sal gave you a pretty good description on Iwo, and pretty good experience. Thank God we came out alive. But when we hit the beach, we couldn't get off the beach. They had us zeroed in, and I always remember Iwo too. We had Matsubachi, the 5th Division, cut across Matsubachi with 90 minutes. It's a port shot, a mountain here, narrow here, and it widened out. And on the right side, his company was told that they were going to have the toughest part of the island. It was all solid rock, believe it or not. It was a mountain. The first third is nothing but gravel, and then it became hard as a rock. And they had to scale that to get in. We were stuck on the beach for a couple of days. You couldn't move, and you would hear this screeching sound. They had a tube about the length of this table, and it was full of material. And they set these mortars off. Now you could hear it screeching, and you could look on the sky, and you could actually see this bomb screeching off overhead. And if you were seeing it come down, you took a chance getting up and running away from it, because it landed in the middle of this room, everything in 10 yards on each side of the tent. Body parts flying, people dead. And that's the way it was for a couple of days. Well, finally, you had to get those airfields, and we did. Now, it's hard to realize this. Take a football field and put 400 blockhouses, 400 blockhouses that you can't see. They're buried, and all they have is a slip. They had tanks buried, concrete walls 3 feet thick, and you had to go through those to secure the airfield. Well, it was hell. It was living hell. When we got through the airfield, he explained to you about the amphitheater. The amphitheater, they had Turkey Point, but they had the key to the whole island. Hill 382. 382 was on a level with Matsubachi. And when you got to it, you had nowhere to go. There weren't any Japanese, but 382 had openings, caves, and Matsubachi had caves. And between the two, they had built these caves. The walls were 3 and 4 feet thick. They were 4 levels high. You called down, and one area they had a hospital. 400 beds, 500 beds. They had a kitchen. They had a room enough to keep 20,000 Japanese underground. You had to face that. The Japs came out only at night. And once in a while, I wish I had a big enough picture, on Matsubachi you could actually see the holes. At the other end, a Company E, my job was a runner, scout, and they'd send me out scouting during the day. And it's difficult to explain this to you. We'd move in and maybe go 50 yards today, maybe 200 yards tomorrow. Well, my company was the lead company, Company F, and my company commander would send me here and there and back to the battalion. Well, back in battalion, they wanted to know where Company E was, so they sent me out looking for it. Well, I found it. There was one Marine standing there, and I asked him where Company E was. He was crying. I said, "What's the matter? I'm Company E." One man for one. Think of that, one man. There were 200 men in a company plus. So I had to report that. So my job for 26 days was running here, running there, and finally, Company G made some progress, and his company commander in the meantime got the Congressional Medal of Honor for taking out one of those blockhouses. The difficult thing about getting medals is he deserved it probably, but we always forget the guys like Sal and the others who took them out too. But anyway, they tried to take 382 time after time. They couldn't do it. Well, finally we were sent up to see if we could take it. So my company commander was from Guadalcanal all over, hell of a man. So we managed to get to the top, he, myself, the adjutant, and believe it or not, the bugler for the battalion, 4 of us reached the top. And we landed up in a big shell hole, and everyone who ever got to the top had to retreat because the Japs came out of their holes. So he called me over and said, TJ, go back to the battalion and tell them I'm going to bring the rest of the company up here and come hell or high water, we're not leaving it. We lost too many men. So I ran back, and sure enough, reported to our battalion commander, Garrison, and he told him the facts. Turned around to go, and he said, where are you going? I said, got to get back. He said, open your eyes. It was dark. You realize it. So he kept me there. The next day, my company commander left the hill, came down, wanted to know where I was. He thought I was killed. So the battalion commander gave his stuff. So I went with him back up to the hill and spent the night with him. And the only way I can explain it to you is we're all in there waiting, and all hell breaks loose. Thousands of Japs, it seemed to us, came out of their holes. Those that led down under the ground. And it became so that you're standing side by side, back to back. You run out of ammunition, you don't have time to reload your rifle. It's like you come to a club. You're fighting with knives and nuts and whatnot. Well, after that night, we secured 382, and that was the deciding factor on Iwo Jima. They pulled us off, and the very next day, they shipped us straight back to Hawaii. In the meantime, we were getting ready for invading Japan. And our general called us together. Now, they pulled all the Marines from the United States and Hawaii. They're guard duty Marines, and they had a job to do. They had to guard different ammunition posts and airfields. So anyway, the general got us all together and said, you're not going to see combat ever again. So in my company, we had 229 men. There were 29 of us plus a lieutenant that survived. Well, I was assigned to guard Pearl Harbor, a place called Pearl City, where all the aircraft carriers came, and I was in charge of detail. And it was pretty nice duties after living on C rations and K rations and a couple of cigarettes. And I always remember sitting down the first time and posted the guard. I posted the guard and everything, sat down to have breakfast, and a guy came up to me, a busboy, and said, what do you want for breakfast? I looked at him, I hadn't had that experience since I was at boot camp. And I said, what do you have? We've got, now I'm telling you, we eat canned goods. You want fresh eggs? You want cereal? You want ham? I looked at him, you gotta be kidding. He said, no. I said, give me one of all. He laughed. What are you laughing at? Every one of the men you brought with you said the same thing. I gave, oh, I weighed 136 pounds when I got there. I got up to 220 pounds, believe it or not. And regarding the warehouses, there were over 200 waves there guarding and servicing the warehouses. So every second week I had to go to one of the people and say, look, I need a new set of clothes. And we got a call back to Maui, and the general manager said, you're all going home. So within 3 days, we were on an aircraft carrier, went back to San Diego, Camp Petaluma, and 2 days later, we were on a train to go back to Cambridge, Maryland, where I was discharged. And we were out in the Pacific so fast, we were the first Marines to get out of it, we were the first ones to go to combat out of it. And it was so quick, all we got was a piece of paper typed saying that we had served and our material would be mailed to us. A month later, I got all my discharge papers. Well, I talked an awful lot. I hope it gave you a little insight from Sal's viewpoint and mine. And I want to say this about this class group. I've been studying you very carefully, and I was a school teacher, believe it or not, and I tell the story when I became a teacher, I hated school. And my mother would say, those teachers are just spinning around in their grave, thinking that you're a teacher. Well, I became a principal and administrator. And I'm studying you boys and girls. I have to say this admittedly. I had a number of high schools I did. You're the best dog-looking bunch I've seen in a school in a long time. And I mean that. You're attentive. I'm sure your teachers enjoy teaching you. And just take care of yourself. God bless you all. And good luck. Do you have any questions on what I didn't really answer? Actually, I don't know if we have enough time. Yes, ma'am?
Class, if you ever have a chance to get to Washington,
Oh, yes.
boy, let me tell you something. That's it's fantastic, the things that you'll see down there. Quantico, which is the Marine Corps Museum. So many different places. In Arlington, you'll see so many white crosses. This is the reason why you have all these freedoms. Somewhere along the line, somebody picked up the check and paid dearly for it so you can enjoy all your freedoms. I went to the flag, to the Iwo Jima Memorial. There, we went completely all the way around. And all the way around were all the battles that the Marine Corps fought, especially during World War II. We stopped in front of the one that said Iwo Jima. I broke down. I started crying. The guide that was over there, he put his arm on my shoulder. He said, "Don't worry, pal. You're not the first. You won't be the last to cry." But if you get a chance, Washington is utterly fantastic. Thank you.
You're clean, you neat, you have guns, and you
My door's unlocked, yeah.
Clean yourself up.
Mike, please.
Pretty soon. And I say this sincerely, I should